Hello and welcome to the show. Today we have a very fascinating guest today. He is a gift. Hank Roberts, who is a founder and CEO of Peacemakers Incorporated. And I think we'll learn more about where he got that name and what he's doing, because he's a very exciting young man, very smart. It makes me so happy to see young men doing the things that Hank is doing, along with my co-host, Barbara.
Yes.
Barbara Cannon, Dr. Barbara Cannon. And we both met Hank around the same time, and we've talked with him before. We got so excited, we thought we should do a show.
Yes.
So, thank you for watching. And Barbara, would you like to start off with this young man?
You're right. I would like to indicate that I had met Mr. Roberts before that initial meeting with you years back when I was at Merritt College. And I think it was something that we were working on that brought him to my attention. And then the next time I came in contact with you was with the Juvenile Justice.
Right.
I invited you to come to a Juvenile Justice Delinquency Prevention Commission. Well, actually, restorative justice was what it was about.
Right.
And the fact that you were there, I said to the people in the group that we had a peacemaker with us.
Right.
And people radiated to this gentleman so beautifully, because restorative justice is about dealing with the harm that has been done.
Exactly.
And the harm sometimes goes back and forth between the person who's harming and the person who is being harmed. So it's how to make sure that everyone is being held accountable for their actions.
Well, you know, the thing that fascinated me with Hank right off the bat was, you know, a lot of young black people that live in ghettos all over this country, the women get away a little easier than the boys, than the men. It seems that the society just sort of plays terrible tricks on them, starting out very young. So I was fascinated to see a young man who seemed to be untouched by all of that. And so I guess my first question, Hank, is tell us about your childhood, because it must have been unusual, because you're such a well-balanced, interesting, you're at peace with yourself. You have a wonderful disposition. You don't seem to be angry. How have you managed to become this young man that you are today?
Well, my childhood originated in St. Louis, Missouri. And wow, my childhood was an abundance of wealth, royalty, wisdom, because I had the opportunity to observe two of the most powerful people in my life, two of the most powerful mentors and role models in my life, and that was my parents. I had an opportunity to see them go through so many challenges, so many obstacles with grace. So I'm torn, but I have to give you a quick example. I recall the fact that we moved 9 times in my childhood, 9 times. So on this 9th move, we were challenged because in St. Louis there are some horrendous winters. And unfortunately, we were not able to find a place to live in that would accommodate 7 children and 2 adults. So my father negotiated an agreement with the owner of the building, because by law the building was condemned. So all of the apartments were boarded up, including the one that we lived in. And so the agreement was that if that building collapsed, my father could not sue the owner of the building. So during that whole winter, we lived in that condemned building. We had candles for lights, and our heat was basically turning on the stove and having a fan in the ceiling of the kitchen that would generate heat throughout the whole apartment, which was a 2-bedroom apartment. But in spite of all of those not so desirable things I just shared, we had dinner, we smiled, we had love. I mean, it was as if we were really not struggling. And so I can sit here today and say proudly that despite the fact that my mother and father only have a 6th grade diploma. Actually, they'll hold a PhD in love.
Absolutely, that's wonderful.
And because of that PhD in love, I can sit here to say to you proudly that I am the first college graduate in the entire history of both of their families.
Isn't that wonderful?
And that is the pillar and the foundation of who I am today.
And when I heard you tell that, I was listening to the word grace that your parents had and
Yes.
harmony. But it sounds as though they also had organizational skills to stay together as a couple, 7 children, and in that management situation, they had to manage the whole process.
Yes.
And I'm thinking those kind of skills are missing in today's world by a lot of children.
Absolutely.
They do not have persons with grace and harmony and organizational skills to deal with whatever comes up.
Yes.
And it sounds like your parents were able to deal with the harsh realities of
Absolutely.
life
Absolutely, absolutely.
every day.
And even more interesting is that my father's father was actually married 3 times, and my mother's father was married 4 times, and my parents have been married over 50 years. They were determined that they were not going to have separation among their children.
And this also says not only determination, but they had learned somehow. I don't know how they, as a couple, did they teach one another or just loved one another? What, was this a magic thing that made them just stay together for 50 years?
I actually believe that it was a commitment that they both agreed upon on a spiritual level, that they felt that it was important to model love in front of their children so that their children could live wholesome and well-balanced lives, which is the reason why I clearly believe that I agree with what Jerry was saying, that I do have a certain sense of peace about myself because I was surrounded by a peaceful childhood.
Well, you know, Hank, you and I were talking earlier before the show started on the way over to the studio, and I have been fascinated, the older I get, to see how important the simple hug is
Yes.
when you're a child. I've had more kids that are dysfunctional or people that are grown up and they're doing things and they can't relate. They don't like to be touched and things like that. And I said, well, what was the matter? I said, you know, my mother never hugged me. And I've heard it so much that I'm realizing if people only knew the benefit that a simple hug can do, that is the beginning of the loving and the touching, and a child needs to be touched.
Yes.
And I don't think, I think people say, well, I'm walking downtown in front of people, but it's so, I love it when I see people tossing the head of the kid, their little child, or, give them a little touch. It means so much, and I think that's what you had.
Yes.
And it's a lifelong gift.
Yes.
And I think
Yes.
if that's one of the, somebody ought to write a book about hugging, just hugging. We're not even talking about kissing. Just to be touched and held and
Yeah.
cuddled.
That's
And
absolutely.
what we don't realize is a lot of parents are incapable of doing that because their parents didn't do it.
Right. Right.
And so
Yes.
that's just fascinating. So you're telling me now that the most important experience you had as a child was this fascinating love that came from your
Oh,
parents.
it was unbelievable.
Yes.
I was able to daily see them kiss each other in the morning before they would
Yes.
leave, and they would embrace each other with a kiss when they came home.
And you remembered that.
Oh, absolutely.
And
And
did
we
they-
would get hugs,
Oh,
and we
you would
would
get
get
them too,
kisses,
yes,
and
as children.
yes, and I believe that consistent love that was given to us and that we saw as a demonstration is the reason why all of my living siblings are college graduates.
There you go.
Oh, wow.
All
That's
of us
amazing.
are.
Well, you know, the other important thing is that people who are hugged and loved as children, and I can't express it too much, really, because parents, I think, dismiss that. They don't think, they think, well, I'm working and I'm tired and I'm putting my kid through college.
Yes.
Well, the kid is going to college, but it's what he's going to do with what he gets in college, and he can't function
Right.
if he hasn't been touched and loved and nurtured, and so that's very important.
Yes.
And it brings us to the fact that we don't realize how related we are as human beings. We may not know each other, but the fact that Hank has been loved and touched and can grow up and love himself, which is the most important thing, then he can come around and create something called Peacemakers Incorporated.
Yes.
So, I mean, this is what we're talking about. We're all related, and we need to be in touch with each other if someone's not being hugged, then maybe we should hug them. I think we're talking about in the schools and things like this. And so let's hear a little bit about Peacemakers and how you found your way there when you were once a pharmaceutical salesman, a top salesman in the country, I hear.
Yes, I actually had no interest, no desire to be involved with any form of a nonprofit because I associated nonprofit as meaning no income, and obviously for me to be motivated to get through college, I felt like I needed to earn as much money as I could. But life is funny. A lot of times, just the things you say that you're not going to do are exactly the things that
you were born to do, maybe.
Oh, absolutely. So you're absolutely right. I was fortunate to become the #1 salesman in the pharmaceutical industry, and it was an interesting accomplishment because I was a sales rep in the wholesale market, and actually in that particular year I outsold both the wholesale and the retail market.
Goodness.
So that stands as a historical accomplishment even today. But most importantly, getting back to how Peacemakers really started, I, for some reason, think that at some point in my life I might have been a race car driver in some past experience or whatever, because I ended up getting 3 speeding tickets in less than 1 month. So I was in a challenging situation because I couldn't afford to lose my license because I needed to drive in order to keep my employment. So I negotiated with the courts, and they honored my negotiation by offering me 300 hours of community service, and I was not allowed to drive for a month anytime after 5 o'clock. And so obviously if I broke those agreements, there would be some major consequences. So I started reflecting back on my graduation night, and I just felt a compellment to figure out how can I use my experience growing up of struggle and give back to children who are going through many challenges similar to mine. And so as I was deciding where do I go to give this community service, that thought entered into my mind. So I went to the Boys and Girls Club, and they offered me 3 opportunities to give back. One was to teach children how to ballet, which I really don't have an interest in that at all. The second choice was to teach children fencing, and I've seen enough knives growing up in St. Louis that didn't appeal to me at all. And the third choice was to coach soccer. And I've never played soccer in my life. Matter of fact, I didn't have a clue about the game of soccer. But I did feel some athletic inclination to the sports. So I decided, okay, I'll coach soccer. So on the very first day of practice, there was about 55 children showed up. At least 50 of those children were Latino Hispanic, bringing their soccer balls, bouncing it off their heads, off their shoulders, off their knees. And I'm saying to myself, how do you coach children who already know the game? So I got smart, and at the very first practice, I asked each one of those soccer players to share with me, what's your favorite practice drill? What's your favorite soccer move? And I began to put together a coaching practice around the information that I received from those children. And in 4 years, I became the Northern California Soccer Coach of the Year.
Oh, wow.
Coaching children from the flatlands on 66th Avenue, what's called back then the Village, where they said children would never play soccer.
That was Oakland, California.
Oakland, California. And the children emerged from the Village, which was a project that really had all kinds of multi-ethnicities there. So ultimately, the children that were playing were Latino, Hispanic, African Americans, Cambodians. It was just a broad,
really
absolutely. When we went to a game, the opposing team they were usually amazed to see such a rainbow coalition of children, but most importantly, they saw the unity that those children shared on the field and off the field. So that's kind of the beginnings of how Peacemakers started, was through a soccer program. And as we begin to get more involved with soccer, we begin to create academic requirements. We begin to adhere to behavior codes that children had to honor in order to play in the game. But unfortunately, in the off season, that's when we were challenged because a lot of the children no longer had any kind of requirements to, to maintain to be able to play. So the mothers were complaining and saying, Coach Roberts, can we play soccer year round because my son, he's off the chain when he's not playing soccer. So I really couldn't afford to do that because I was still juggling my job and trying to do both. So it became apparent that maybe we should have mentoring in the off season. Go into the schools, work with the teachers, work with the parents, and build a relationship between those individuals, and that would cause some more continual connections and accountability with the children. So that was the initial birth of Peacemakers.
But then why did you call it Peacemakers Incorporated?
Well, it also was very interesting because the majority of the children that played on the team were children that were from unpeaceful homes. Many of the children were dealing with drug abuse in their homes, violence, and they would come to practice looking very angry, looking very upset, despite the fact that they showed up. And so I really realized that what we need to do as coaches, we need to instill into these boys peace. And so we would sit down before practice and actually talk about what it's like to be peaceful and what happens to you when you have peace. And so we would actually do a rites of passage before practice, getting into healing around peace and the power of it. And so as I continue to look at that and realize the importance of peace in those boys' spirit, I also reflected on a scripture in the Bible that says, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called children of God.
That's right.
And so with the culmination of that scripture and the need to instill peace into the boys that were playing soccer, the name Peacemakers emerged.
Yes.
That is so powerful.
Isn't that a beautiful thing?
Blessed are
It's
the
a wonderful
peacemakers.
thing.
Yeah, because that reality, I think, is what's needed all the time.
Absolutely.
And especially now, it just seems that there's a real need for peace on a daily basis.
Absolutely.
And so the organization that you did with the soccer, you developed a system.
Yes.
And as a result of that, you're like a visionary that pulls it together. And when I was thinking about Peace from Broken Pieces, the title of a book that's recently come off the press by Jan Van Zandt. But this is what you're able to do, because you said they were angry. They came with anger, and you somehow came up with a way to deal with that.
Yes, yes. As a matter of fact, oftentimes one of the motivations that we were very successful in instilling was if you are not having any problems in school, if you are being a very fair soccer player at the game, win or lose at the end of the game, there would be some kind of reward. And that reward could be an opportunity to go to McDonald's, because at that time, even as now, that was a treat.
Oh, sure.
Or you would be able to come over to my house, actually, and we would watch movies. I invited kids over to my house a lot, and I actually did sleepovers.
How many boys are we talking about?
Started out with 50 and actually grew to about 275.
And you
But I
had
had
50?
I had other coaches also.
Oh, okay.
So we divided, the teams
number,
up.
yeah.
And so it was somewhat of a policy among the 6 coaches that would be part of a way to build relationships with those children, was to have them do sleepovers.
But aren't you mystified when you look back how one comes upon their life's work? You had no idea when you did that. You were just couldn't wait to get it over with and get back to work.
Exactly.
Wait a minute, I like this.
That was my plans, and I began to realize that I was actually walking in my calling, and so the challenge was, how do you maintain financial stability and walk in your calling? And that was a real difficult task for me, but I had to honor my calling and leave corporate America.
That's a very brave thing to do.
And I was making over $100,000 a year, and I'm not,
that's a very brave thing to do, really. To walk away, it's very difficult to walk away. And you were good at what you did.
Yes.
So, well, I salute you, I'll tell you that.
So you left corporate America
Yes.
for, what would you call the way of life after corporate America?
The community, really, it's community service.
Community
yeah.
orientation.
Yes.
So the community work, there was work there to do,
Yes.
a
And
great need.
oh, it was a great, and the need began to become more intensified because there were more and more children who were dealing with broken homes,
Yes.
dealing with neighborhoods that were corrupt and infested with drug use, drug abuse. And so there was a real call to step out and make a difference, to challenge these
Right.
issues that were facing our children.
Well, what was your vision at that time? And I know it's, your vision expands and changes,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
initially, what was it you wanted to do?
Well, initially, the vision was to really focus on how can we redirect positive behavior in children, specifically boys. But as time began to evolve and I began to get more involved in this calling, it became apparent to me that the origin of children's behavior started at home. And so it became important to become a family mentoring organization, to begin to address the needs of all of the components in the home, meaning the parents as well as the children.
Well, now, how do you make it work? In other words, do you call the parents in once a week, or how do you connect with the parents?
Right. Well, one of the key statements that I make a lot is our vision. And Peacemakers' vision is to promote healthy families and safe communities. And fortunately, because we are a school-based mentoring organization, by default, many of the children who have problems around behavior, problems in terms of academic deficiencies, are the ones that are referred to us by the administration. So these are the children who often are from the homes that are facing the problems that I just shared, disenfranchised parents not having connections, broken homes. So those children by default are then referred to us. And so our next step then is to schedule a meeting with the parents to introduce them to our services, which includes more than just working with the child's academic needs, but we want to find out, is there a food issue? Is there a clothing issue? Is there an employment issue? Because we want to begin to address the needs of the entire family. And once we approach it from that angle, the parents open up and they have a readiness to receive us, because we're not coming in condemning and criticizing them as parents.
No. You're looking for solutions.
Nor condemning their child. But we're saying, how can we help the whole entire family?
Well, now, have you had an outreach program developed yet that would have, I'm sure there are all these wonderful corporate people around that have been giving a lot to the community because they know that the community is hurting.
Yes.
For instance, is there a connection at the food bank for the food? What about clothing? Like the Salvation Army, and places that have these things, and they're in need themselves, but they're also people who give.
Yes.
I'm thinking you would need a network of people to satisfy all of these needs, and I'm sure if you looked hard enough, you'd find them.
Well, absolutely, and we're fortunate in one sense because we have a partnership with David Street Family Resource Center, and David Street does offer some of the same things I just described, the food, the clothing, and sometimes short-term shelter. But what's become a major problem is that Peacemakers now is in 5 school districts. And so it's going to be important that we reach into those other school districts and connect with other organizations that can provide those additional supports around food, clothing, and shelter. One of the significant achievements that we are revisiting again is a collaboration with Peralta College, whereby they're allowing our parents who are undereducated or basically who have no skills to go back to college and either earn an AA degree or to learn a vocational trade.
Well,
and it's amazing when you empower a parent who feels like they're not worth it, have low self-esteem. When they get that empowerment, it actually transcends into empowerment of their child. So when they say to their son or daughter, have a great day at school today. They can really mean it.
Mean it, yes.
Because they are feeling that they are on a track of success.
And it must be wonderful for them to work with their children as they learn.
Absolutely. And so we encourage those parents, now that they're feeling that self-esteem, to then get involved with going to the school, checking on their child, creating a positive relationship with the teachers. It's just amazing when you empower the family that you basically transform everybody within that family.
You're really showing that the power of an education is something that the human being needs education.
Yes.
And the person who is appropriately educated, it has been brought out who they are as a human being. And I believe that humanity that you're bringing out of the parents so that they can be the best that they can be.
Yes.
Because every human being is supposed to be what they're supposed to be.
Exactly.
And that sounds like you're nurturing that by building that relationship with parents.
Yes.
Now, you know, believe it or not, we only have about a minute left. And I'd like to know, as quickly as you can, could you give us the mission statement of Peacemakers Incorporated?
Well, the mission of Peacemakers really is to provide a delivery system that addresses the needs of the family, of the school, and the community. And in doing that, we believe that it's a unique way of restoring the village.
Before we wrap up, I really hope you're going to contact President Barack
that's
Obama
exactly
and
what he's doing,
Michelle Obama, because their whole, I would say, humanity that is within each of them is so holistic.
Yes.
And it's about proper parenting and good parenting and relationship building, eating properly, health, education, to be the best human being that you can be. I think that's, the nation needs this. So that you're doing 5 schools already, and he needs to know about that because he wants education to be delivered.
Well, you know what's interesting is that just recently, in collaboration with another organization, we have opened our first family wellness clinic.
Oh, that's
Really?
And it's housed within Tasparenga Housing on 85th and San Leandro Boulevard in East Oakland. And that's another concept that we've developed that addresses the physical, emotional, intellectual needs. And that's the beginnings of restoring the village.
Well, you know, Hank, your the title and everything and the address of your Peacemakers Incorporated will be flashed on our screen. We hope people will write in to talk about it. We most certainly are going to have to do another show next week with you to find out the rest of the wonderful things that you're doing. So thank you so much for joining me. And thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week.